Hey, this is Michael Emery. Thanks for tuning into the Slow Baja. This podcast is powered by Tequila Fortaleza, handmade in small batches and hands down my favorite tequila. Well, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know I'm an absolute minimalist when it comes to Baja travel. But the one thing I never leave home without is a good old paper map. And my favorite is the beautiful, and I mean beautiful, Baja Road and Recreation Atlas by Benchmark Maps. It's an oversized 72-page book, jam-packed with details, and now you can get it from me at slowbaja.com. That's right. You can get it in the Slow Baja shop. And in fact, you better get two. One for your trip planning at home and one for your Baja rig. And if you love maps and you can't get enough of them like me, let me tell you about two sites I am absolutely obsessed with. Eastview MapLink and longitudemaps.com. Whatever you're looking for in maps, it's there. From the entire Benchmark collection to Baja wall maps to custom maps, you'll find it all at longitudemaps.com or evmaplink.com. You know, I've long said it, ask your doctor if Baja's right for you. Well, if you've been hankering to get down to Slow Baja with me, you gotta check out the Adventures tab at slowbaja.com. All my trips are there, from my famed fall vintage extravaganza to my winter and summer expeditions, which are open to trucks of any age. You know, on a Slow Baja expedition, your meals are always included, which really does take the sting out of camping. And when we get off the trail, let me tell you, we have the happiest of happy hours. If good dirt roads, private campsites, ranch stays, great food, and great people sounds like your kind of fun, well, you got to check out the Adventures tab at slowbaja.com. But don't delay. These trips are small, they're highly immersive, and they will sell out. And folks, just so you know, I am always here for you for your Baja trip planning questions. One question, 100 questions. The easy way to get me is slowbaja.com/contact. And if you'd like to go to Baja and you don't want to go by yourself, you don't have a vintage vehicle, my winter trip doesn't work out for you, I am happy to talk to you about organizing and leading a private guided tour. I've done it. I've loved it. The pictures are over there at slowbaja.com/adventures, and you can check them out. And if you've got some questions, let's talk. Hey, thanks for tuning in to today's Slow Baja. My heaping dose of gratitude goes out to all the fine folks who joined me on the Slow Baja winter expedition. We had a big trip, 15 trucks, 28 people, and it was truly amazing. I've got a podcast, actually a couple podcasts coming up that will relate to that trip, so I won't tell you too much about it now, but great support staff. Thanks to my trip wrangler, Noah, also videographer. Everybody does two things. Edgar, photographer, Donovan brothers on the sweep, Ski Patrol, Sam and Wino on sweep 2. Kevin, thank you for stepping up and bartending and making coffee. Edward and Estelle and Frank. Edward and Estelle and Frank came. My kids, my twins, and my brand new rescue dachshund, Frank. Got his first trip to Baja, and he lived to tell the tale. Anyways, another heaping dose of gratitude goes out to my sponsors. You know, I couldn't do these things without the sponsors. Baja Bound Insurance. God bless these guys. Baja Bound Insurance and the Baja Bound Finish Line Fiesta, where I get to present the Baja's Right For You trophy. Yeah, that was truly a great event. Thank you, Baja Bound. Benchmark Maps. Everybody gets a benchmark map. Get to trace the route, and that's just like the coolest keepsake memento from the trip, to be able to flip open that big, beautiful book and say, and we went here, and then we went there. So much cooler than just scrolling over your screen on your phone saying, oh, yeah, we just see this line here. Well, we did. Yeah, Benchmark Maps. Thank you so much. Tequila Fortaleza. So hard to find tequila Fortaleza these days. So hard to find. Thank you for sharing. Sharing is caring. So great to be able to share Fortaleza with my folks on the Slow Baja trips. Rocky Talkie Radio's brand new promotional partner, sponsor partner. huge upgrade. The Rocky Talkie 5-watt radio is just a huge upgrade over the other junk I've been using, and really a delight. Feels great in the hand, really works well. I had the whip antenna on mine, and the Donovans had the whip antenna on theirs. We were always a couple miles apart and had no problem staying in touch. Everybody on the trip had a Rocky Talkie, super easy to set up. I had Ryan Donovan, 11 years old, set up all the radios for me. Yep, it's that easy. They're beautiful. They feel beautiful in your hands, and amazing. One charge. They lasted the full 6 days of the trip with juice left over. Rocky Talkie, can't say enough good stuff about them. Shieldman seats. Shieldman, when you're driving a beast of an old truck like mine, hundreds and hundreds of miles through Baja, you got to have a good set of seats as a place not to compromise. Buy once, cry once. Shieldman, can't recommend them highly enough. And last but certainly not least, another new sponsor, Iron and Resin. Yeah, I looked good when you look at those photographs. See me in those union work pants, those olive green union work pants. Well, I wore them every day for I think a month straight, and they look great, feel great. That Scout jacket just got better and better and better, the dirtier and dirtier and dirtier that it got. So thanks, Iron Resin Clothes. They're meant to wear in, not wear out. And a special thanks to Lou Bank. You got to hear the podcast with Lou, Sacred Agave. Lou sent up 10 liters of mezcal. Now, I had asked him to help me find a mezcal sponsor, and I thought he was just going to twist somebody's arm, somebody that he knew, a fine mezcal maker in the league of Fortaleza, let us say. And Lou sent up a couple boxes, and as it turns out, they were from his personal stash in Oaxaca. So thanks, Lou. We made a new cocktail called the Smoky Senorita, and I got to tell you, your mezcal, Lou, made a lot of people very, very happy. All right, today's show is with one of the best dressed, most interesting, coolest cats that I know, Paul D'Orlean. He is a legend in the vintage motorcycle world. He publishes the amazing site, the Vintagent. He's a curator, a historian, a photographer. And when I say a photographer, he's a photographer who's using all these antique wet plate, crazy, Civil War era photography techniques in Baja. He's got a little van that he's got outfit for this stuff, and he does this crazy stuff, makes beautiful photographs. Anyways, I said he's a rider of vintage motorcycles, and he spends a lot of time in Baja now. And so without further ado, Paul D'Orlean today on Slow Baja. It's Slow Baja. I'm with Paul D'Orlean.
No, D'Orlean.
D'Orlean.
Start again.
I'm... It's Slow Baja. I'm in San Francisco. I'm in Paul D'Orlean's garage. Did I get it right, Paul?
You did.
Close enough?
Yeah.
And I'm delighted that you're making some time for me. I've followed the Vintagent for ages. Love what you're up to, and I love that you're in Baja half the year now. And you were just telling me before I managed to turn this thing on, lucky I noticed that it wasn't on, that you're aware of the Slow Baja thing because of Dimitri.
Oh, no, I found Slow Baja way before Dimitri found you. I've been following you from way back because, living down there, you do keep track of who's around and who's doing interesting stuff, because I'm always looking for kindred spirits, down there. And that doesn't necessarily mean gringos. It just means people who really appreciate the place. And to be honest, it's a funny thing about Mexico, especially Baja, not about Mexico per se, but Baja. Most of the people I know who are natives of Los Cabos have never driven up the peninsula. It's a trip, and certainly have never done it off-road. So I keep my eye out for people who are adventurous souls and understand and appreciate the place, because I have a deep reverence for the place and its history.
Well, I've got a bunch of questions right here in my little book, and I don't think I'm going to try and keep any sort of proper order about this. You've been able to tell your story. Anybody who's interested in you're a quick Google search away, and there's been about 1,000 podcasts in your regular blog and everything else. So I'm not going to ask you about your terrible days growing up in that dangerous city of Stockton. Did you know Chris Isaac?
I didn't, but my older brothers and sisters did. They knew his sister Mary quite well. Not so much. Oh yeah, it's a small
place.
Yeah,
it's a small place. And I do have one interesting question. One question that has interested me about your upbringing in Stockton. Your dad was a University of Pacific college professor. Right. What did he teach?
He started out teaching history and moved on into economics, and then ultimately UOP opened a business school and they wanted to fill out their staff, their professor's staff. So he went into business administration. So he had to do a whole re-education, and that's where he finished the last maybe 20 years of his career, was at the business department.
And is that what led to Sea Ranch? Like, okay, I can take this on and I can get a place in Sea Ranch. And
well, my family history is super interesting.
That's what I'm getting to. Like, I think it is.
I'm a fifth generation San Franciscan, and one side, my mother's side, were people who came to California for the gold rush, not to pan for gold, but they were smart and they wanted to sell stuff to the miners. And the other side, my father's side, were coming to San Francisco on the way to New Zealand. So they got stuck in the harbor, in the bay, as did every ship that came in. You can see those photographs that look like a denuded forest that actually all got scuttled and is underneath
Battery
downtown.
Street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, the family goes way back, and my great-grandfather was, on my father's side, was a property developer in San Francisco, and my family were kind of wealthy bohemians and always interested in the arts. And my father's mother was she was among the first female journalists in the country. She worked for William Randolph Hearst in the 20s and 30s until I think the 40s. And she wrote about actually business. She wrote about international trade. Not that it was particularly interesting, but I do have writing in my family, that gene somewhere. But she went around the world, I think 9 times on her own.
Wow.
I think 7 of those were before it was possible for air travel. So I have a lot of stuff from her travels around the world. I have a Tonka, which is a Tibetan prayer flag painting that the Dalai Lama gave her in 1959. She was the first woman to ever be granted a private interview with the Dalai Lama.
Wow.
And she didn't go as a journalist. She was also like a spiritual seeker and really interested in comparative religion. And I think she had personal questions for him. Anyway, curious family.
No, exactly. And so that's what I was kind of getting to. Like, what did your dad teach? Because just doing my research on you, and again, you've been on my radar for a long time. I've been kind of pinging you, trying to get where we're going to be together, whether that was in Baja. I had kind of hoped it was going to be in Baja, but it's here now. And it's clear to me that you're all over the place, but deeply all over the place.
Yeah, I move around a lot. I mean, I've lived in different places in Europe. I've lived in New York. I've lived in LA briefly. I lived in London. I've lived in Warsaw for a minute. And, travel has been a huge part of my life. Surprisingly, very little in Asia. It's been mostly in Europe, but pretty deep. And I have strong connections there. I've also been down to Australia and stuff many times. And
right. Well, this was the part of the show that I was supposed to ask you about how you got to Baja, which, actually that was the end of the show. I was going to get to how did you get to Baja after all these places that you've lived, but you lived all over in a lot of sophisticated places, which makes me say, why, obviously San Jose del Cabo is pretty sophisticated these days compared to where it was 20 years ago or 25 years ago, but there's a lot of dirt roads still.
Love it.
And that's so do I. And I know you've got some bikes down there that get you out on those dirt roads.
Yeah.
But what took you down there? How did you get there originally, and why did you say this is the place that we're going to buy and we're going to spend
It's so funny how that happened. I mean, my wife and I, a long story, I actually moved to Paris after getting divorced in 2009. I just wanted out of San Francisco, and a friend there found an apartment for me, and so I was there for a year and a half. And I lost my apartment in Paris, and it was in 2011, late 2011, and it was impossible to find a new apartment. It was let's say, peak crisis years with Airbnb ruining the housing market for rentals. And so Susan, who was then my girlfriend, suggested we meet halfway. I was thinking about moving to London. She says, maybe New York. And I said, okay, I can do New York. I'd never lived in New York. My daughter had gone to college there. Her daughter was going to college there. And in the end, both of her daughters went to college. So we took an apartment there for 10 years. And so we would go, let's say every 6 weeks, we would go for a couple of weeks. And then in 2020, okay, Baja, that's her thing. Her late husband was an architect, and he had his firm, Kaplan McLaughlin Diaz, KMD, huge firm, hundreds of employees, had an office in Mexico because Herb had family who were Mexican, like fourth cousins or something. But they were from Guadalajara, but he opened an office there and got involved in the development of Pedregal, like the resort Pedregal, and was invited to invest early. So he did at Susan's encouragement because they had been going to Hawaii. It was too freaking far, and Cabo's a lot easier to get to than Hawaii when you've got little kids. So she's been going there for, gosh, I mean, her father had a place in Puerto Vallarta in the 80s. So she's been going there for 40 years. We're going to get
Susan on the show soon.
Susan's amazing. Much more entertaining than me.
Thanks, Paul. Talk to you soon.
For the hookup, right? Anyway, long story short, she started inviting me down there. We actually bought a month of time at a place called Flora Farms, which is like an organic farm with 10 little cottages and a kick-ass restaurant. And so we would spend a month there every year. We were there in March of 2020 for the month. And when the shit hit the fan, it was like, nobody's coming here, and we're not going to leave. So we stayed for 5 months.
Wow.
It was like, I mean,
what an extraordinary place to get stuck.
People had such awful experiences, and I feel guilty, but we were living in paradise.
Literally.
Picking our own food. We were getting papayas off the tree and mangoes and pulling celery and strawberries and eggplant and everything. And the farm was still going full tilt, so everything was available. They had animals. They had, so we could get anything we wanted. And we had no obligations. And to be in that place with a dirt bike and our wet plate photography gear, we started photographing the place and really exploring southern Baja, and I just fell in love. I mean, how could one not fall in love with Los Cabos in that sort of circumstance? The beach was right there, and we had the best and the fish and the best food possible. And
so your biggest problem was probably, as you got so excited about photography, finding the chemicals that you needed to keep doing your work. I'm assuming if you're doing wet plate, you're
right.
Using stuff up that you need to figure out how to get more of.
Exactly.
And Amazon's probably not bringing it to you there.
No, you can't ship those chemicals internationally. Through connections, Susan's president of a photography foundation in New York called Penumbra Foundation, which is all kind of alternative photography based. Friend of ours said, hey, I got a buddy in Mexico City who does this kind of work. We contacted him. He shipped us the chemistry we needed, and we were able to keep shooting for 5 months.
Wow. Wow, fabulous.
Yeah, it's a body of work that we will eventually publish, but we're still shooting and considering it.
Well, I find I spent many, many years making a living as a photographer, and I find the wet plate stuff so extraordinary. I use a Graflex Super D that I'm thinking I should bring to Baja with me and just slow myself down that much more, handheld 4x5.
For sure.
A la Dorothea Lange, just balance it on my knee and make the shot. 125 at 5.6.
Exactly. You can still get film for that.
Tri-X 4x5. Yeah. The Polaroid film that I used to use 15, 20 years ago is much harder. Yeah. But I don't think I could rise to the challenge of what you're doing. Can you explain a little bit about, because I'm sure Slow Baja's audience is starting to doze off right now and say, what? Wet plate what?
All right.
Can you explain, like, when you go out to take a picture of something, what kind of camera you're using? Right. I'm assuming it's an antique, something with a lens from a junk store or something like that.
Half true.
A lot of them that's
true.
Yeah,
So
a field camera, right?
We use a field camera. It's a new field camera. It's called a
Okay.
Chamonix, which is it's a French design, but it's made in China, and it's beautiful. It's wood and metal, and it's got a bellows. And we are using a lens that we found, but we have a bunch of old lenses, and
old bikes, old lenses,
old process.
Mm-hmm.
So the process is from the 1850s. If you ever see a picture of the Civil War or of Abraham Lincoln or of anything before 1880, it's a wet plate photograph. And the beautiful thing about wet plate is, number one, it's handmade. Number two, it is a little bit unpredictable.
For
so
sure.
You get all sorts of happy accidents and interesting mistakes. And number three, the resolution is 1,000 times finer than sheet film, because the silver nitrate in collodion in suspension, the particles are minute, so you can blow these photographs up to the size of a billboard without a loss of resolution. And all that really intrigued me, especially the handmade bit. I actually just wrote the introduction to a book called Art of Ride by a French wet plate photographer, Bernard Testamale, who documented his world for the last 10 years. And it was all about the confluence of people into old vehicles and into old photography, and the question of character. It's like, what is character? Why is character interesting? How do you capture character? What sort of person is interested in these things and dedicates time and effort into old cars, old motorcycles,
Right.
old photographic processes? And not because it's quaint and we don't dress up, in antique clothes. We don't cosplay. This is like, well, people do. And at times I have in my past, I'll confess. I wore vintage riding gear and an old pudding basin helmet until a friend of mine got killed wearing his pudding basin helmet. And I said, oh, okay, this is not cosplay. This is real.
Well, on that, so your process is you're actually coating the piece of film that goes into the back of the camera.
Right.
Is that a 5x7 or an 8x10? What's the size?
I'm using 4x5 mostly.
4x5. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're coating individually
Yep.
the piece that goes into the back of the camera.
Yep.
So that takes a minute.
Yeah.
You got to have the stuff.
You got to have the stuff,
And
it has to be cold, so you have to carry ice. Keep it on ice. Basically, I have black painted aluminum squares that I've cut from bigger sheets, and you pour this stuff called collodion on it, which is a byproduct of smokeless gunpowder that DuPont invented in the 1830s, and it's like the primordial plastic. It's like this goo that you pour out. It's got ether as a solvent, so you get this incredible smell, and which is addictive.
Yeah, and you need some ventilation there.
You need ventilation.
And do you have to do this in complete darkness? Are you doing this by feel?
No, you can use safe light
Okay.
under all this. It's not like regular film photography. You can do everything under a safe light, so you can see.
Okay. Trust me, folks, we're going to get back to Baja and back to motorcycles, back to this. While I'm really getting down the rabbit hole here on this wet plate photography.
So you've got, like, once you've coated this thing, you stick it into a bath of silver nitrate for 90 seconds. Then you can put it into a dark slide, which is a film holder. Then you run out to wherever you've got your camera set up, put it in the back of the camera, expose it for 2 or 3 seconds, run back in, because you've got 5 minutes. Basically, if it's really hot, as it can be in Baja, you've got 3 minutes between when you stick that thing in the plate holder and when you need to develop it, because if it dries out, it's gone. And many times I've had parts of it dry out, and it just kind of ruins the photo. So
yeah, sometimes that's not the happy accident.
No, it's just an accident.
Yeah.
So we get really sweaty a lot of times. Like this, as I was driving back from Baja in late April, early May this year, we had gone on an adventure, a mule ride in the center, in the
Thank you for
Sierra
bringing that
de
up.
San Jose.
That's exactly what I wanted to get to.
A 3-day mule trip, and our guide had told us how to find petroglyphs in Baja, where, the types of landscape, and he told us about one place in particular. So I stopped, and I was able to shoot wet plates of the petroglyphs in this spot. And God, I had to run like 100 yards each direction, and it was like 90 degrees. So we suffer for our art.
Yeah, you do. And I the images that I've seen, and you're sharing them on your Instagram site, which was a real surprise to me. My best buddy, my Mexico adventure wife, who's been going to Baja with me since 1984, he published, reposted one of your images yesterday on Baja Visitor. And I'm like, hey, I shot him a message last night in between a couple of tequilas, sent him a message and said, hey, I'm going to go talk to that guy tomorrow. So funny.
Which image was it?
It was the image of the rock in San Felipe. It's just gorgeous. You said it was a very expensive image because you did some damage to your
my truck.
Your truck.
My God. This is
sorry.
This is the learning curve of Baja, and we're getting back to where your readers are interested. Okay, so I drive a 10,000-pound Ford Transit that the back is a dark room. It's also where I store my motorcycles. And so I was taking photographs all the way up Baja as I drove back north to San Francisco, and I wanted the shot of this island. And because it
was a gorgeous shot, and it was timeless. I mean, it
I've
was
stopped
stunning.
many times there and just done.
Yeah.
And but I got stuck in the sand, and it was the fourth time it's two-wheel drive, my truck. It was the fourth time I'd gotten stuck in the sand just in the prior 6 months. And I just felt so stupid, and I was alone, and I'm digging myself out, and some Mexicans, but in an American truck. So they were living in California. They were of Mexican descent, I should say, pero no habla inglés. So it was good. It's good that I speak Spanish. And they helped me out, but they really fucked up my truck in the process. I was not watching them closely enough, and they managed to rip out the whole turbo system, or the interlinking turbo system. And I was able to drive back north, sounding like a hurricane with these things wide open.
Wow.
Didn't seem to damage the truck, thank God. And I ended up in Gardena Ford, and they put me at the front of the list and fixed it and charged me $4,000. Thank you very much.
Well, I think, Paul, I don't know how you're going to be printing those. Do you platinum print those things? What happens in the future when you start making limited edition portfolios of that work? But that's an easy $4,000 print right there.
Yeah, it's true.
It's
probably worth it. Even
in the right place. Yeah, sure.
No, we've sold a lot of our work, actually. We've exhibited many times, and we do digital prints. We do large. Our typical exhibition print is like 24 by 30 inches, but we've also done 4 foot by 5 foot, which are stunning, but not many people have the room for such a beast.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem.
It's all about the room.
You've the enthusiasm of your voice in talking about making this image and tearing up your truck and being on a mule for 3 days. Baja is, it fires me up. Yeah. I've been going there for 40 years, and I've seen so little of it. I've scratched only the teeny tiniest of tourist spots, even though I've driven, thousands of miles a year on dirt roads every year. Yeah. I've seen so little of it. Yeah. How do you explain the magic of this strange little skinny peninsula that's full of,
Yeah. Well, I'll tell the story of this mule trip. So in dead center of Baja, north, south, east, west, is a small chain of mountains called the Sierra de la San Francisco. And there is a family, the Arces family, who basically they're cowboy goat herders that live way up in the mountains. And so it's kind of due north of San Ignacio. So, or halfway between San Ignacio and Guerrero Negro. So from where we live, it's an 11-hour drive. So it was a 2-day drive to get to this place. And we had arranged beforehand for a guide who was not one of the Arces. They no habla inglés, and we had a party of 5, and not everyone spoke Spanish. So it was.
You need an English-speaking guide.
We had an English-speaking guide from Loreto who'd done it for decades.
Great.
And so the trick is, once you arrive in this tiny little village, that to me could have been any mountain village in the world that was remote and poor. I mean, we could have been in Nepal. We could have been, I don't know, anywhere in the world, because it was people living in stone and tin houses. Animals were integrated. The sheep, the goats, the horses, the mules, the donkeys were totally integrated in their life. And the kids were running around barefoot, and it was beautiful, and they were nothing but friendly and lovely. And they packed up a mule each and a donkey each for us. So we rode the mule. and we had a donkey for our gear and our camping gear and our food and everything. And we spent a day going from up in the mountains. We dropped around 3,500 feet into the bottom of this canyon, and to see the oldest cave paintings in the Americas. They're 10 to 13,000 years old. They're enormous. They're like these magical shamanic figures in black and red are 10, 12 feet tall at times.
Massive.
Massive. And animals and whales.
Yeah.
Like cave paintings of whales. I don't think you see those anywhere else in the world. And, so you spend the first day getting down there. You set up camp. The next day you're on your mules again for a couple of hours to get to where the cave paintings are. And then you start scrambling, and it's not for the faint of heart. The guide asked us, it's like, what kind of physical condition are you in? I mean, what we had to do would not fly in the United States. I mean, there were times when we were rounding a cliff face, and there was one rock in the middle you had to step over, and, the guide had his hand out on the other side. But, if you fell, you were going to get badly hurt, and you really had to scramble, and there were no guardrails. There were, it's raw.
Baja still capital A adventure.
It was Baja, but and we were there for another day, and then we had to ride the mules out, and all of us. So we went with another couple, actually, David and Shelley Martinez. David has been a filmmaker with me on the Vintagent for many years, and incredible photographer, and they've been living down there for 25 years, and we were all deeply, deeply moved by the experience, and inexplicable. We all felt like we had journeyed into the soul of a place, and how often does that happen in your life that you experience a place, like it speaks to you? It was top 3 events in my life in terms of like just travel and experiencing a landscape or a unique place.
Yeah, well, you've given me chills. I can hear it in your voice.
It was amazing. I highly recommend it. It's very, very difficult. It's not particularly expensive, but it's a commitment.
When you say it's difficult, it's rigorous. You feel like you're doing something.
It is physically rigorous.
And you're a guy who's riding antique motorcycles long distances all the time.
And what's funny is people always assume they always assume something is hard that isn't hard. Like people all say, "Oh, okay, how could you stand sitting on a mule for 3 days?" Like, I love the mule. The mule was awesome. It's just like riding a motorcycle across the country. I never have a problem with the bike or my seat or anything. It's always the schedule. The schedule is hard. So, and what was hard about this was, it was an 11-hour drive, and then a 2-hour drive, and then an all-day mule trip, and then another mule trip, and hours of hiking, and then more mules and camping
and sleeping under the stars and all that. It's all primitive.
Incredible, but
not comfortable.
It was a full week's journey, for, let's say, 5 hours of actually seeing these cave paintings. I mean, it was so worth it, but it's like not everybody's willing to do that.
Right.
You can't park there and just go snap pictures and get back in your car. Ain't going to happen. There's no other way down there. And if you get hurt, minimum 7 hours to the closest clinic, so it's real. That's Baja, right?
We're going to take a break right there, Paul, and allow a word from our sponsors, Baja Bound Insurance. We'll be right back with Paul de Leon. No? Yes? Orleans. Orleans?
Yeah, just like the city. Just like the city.
Orleans.
Of Orleans.
Of Orleans. All right. Whatever. I'm going to muff it every time. All right. We'll be right back. Thanks. Here at Slow Baja, we can't wait to drive our old Land Cruiser south of the border. And when we go, we'll be going with Baja Bound Insurance. Their website's fast and easy to use. Check them out at bajabound.com. That's bajabound.com, serving Mexico travelers since 1994. Hey, big thanks to those of you who've contributed to our Baja Baseball project. We launched our gear deliveries on my winter expedition. Michael and Matthew from Barbers for Baja were along for the ride, and we got to deliver that critically needed baseball gear up and down the peninsula. It was really, truly amazing. And on my last trip, I got to go to the state baseball championships and see some of our alums playing, some recipients of the Baja baseball gear deliveries. And congratulations to Guerrero Negro and Mulegé. The Ostinaros and the Cardinalitos won silver and bronze at the state championships. Big stuff. And it was really fun to be there and fun to see them. All right, well, please help us continue this vital work. Make your tax-deductible donation at the Barbers for Baja. Click barbersforbaja.org. Click the Baseball in Baja link, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really do. It is so amazingly gratifying to be able to give these kids this chance to keep playing this sport, keep them on the field, keep them out of trouble. Please check it out. Baseball in Baja link at barbersforbaja.org. Thank you. I want to tell you about these new Rocky Talkie radios that I absolutely love. Heavy duty, beautifully made, easy to program, easy to use. We had 28 people, 15 trucks on the Slow Baja Winter Expedition. You can hand these radios to anybody from a 14-year-old kid to an 80-year-old, and they'll know how to use it. They are that well designed. One charge lasted the entire week. We are never out of range. I happened to upgrade to the accessory whip antenna for my radio and for my sweeps radio, the Donovan Brothers. We were never out of contact. I can't say it strongly enough. Rocky Talkie radios, rockytalkie.com. Check them out. Slow Baja approved. Hey, we're back. Pablo, the magic of Baja, it's real, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. What a place. I mean, I never would have expected. It was not in my list. Let's just put it that way. I've had friends who've been going down to Baja to ride motorcycles for decades, since the 80s, when it was even more raw than it is now. In some ways safer, in some ways more dangerous, with less infrastructure. And I was never a dirt bike guy. I was like a hot rod canyon racer. And so it required a complete shift in my orientation to riding on dirt. I mean, I'm comfortable riding on fire trails and things like that, but I live on a dirt road, and everything I want to do is out in the dirt, and which often means sand in Mexico. And so I had to become comfortable learning to ride on sand, and now I'm very comfortable traveling around down there, and it's so much fun. I ride 4 times more down there, maybe 10 times more down there than I do here, because I've been hit before, and I don't like commuting. I don't commute anymore. Yeah,
it's part of bikes in the city. You do get hit.
Yeah.
Hey, can you tell me about what you have down there? I've seen 3 red bikes on your Instagram. You've got bikes. 3 vintage bikes down there. It doesn't look like you have anything new.
No, I don't.
Is that a hard rule for you? We're sitting in your shop. I'm surrounded by bikes that are almost as old as I am. So it looks like your sweet spot here is sort of mid 60s.
I am the Vintagent. So all my bikes are vintage. Yeah. Except I recently bought an 87 Morini Camel.
Which some will say is vintage.
It is vintage. It's, it's almost 40 years old now. So, but my daily down there is a 1970 Triumph TR6. Perfect bike for Baja. It's got just enough power. You can slide it. It handles beautifully. I've also got a 1970 MZ, which was an East German bike. It's an ISDT bike, so it's an enduro. Superb, best enduro you could buy in the world in 1970, which means it's actually perfectly functional down there. What else? I had a 59 Norton Nomad down there, which is actually here now because I needed to do some work on it that I really couldn't do down there. But yeah, all vintage. I'm taking more Triumphs, another MZ, and the Morini down in January, because I've invited a few of my buddies from Europe to come out and do an exploratory ride, because with the intention of creating an event down there. Let's say I was a spiritual co-founder of an event called Wheels and Waves in Biarritz. And then for 2 years, we had a satellite event in Central Coast, Cayucos, California. And now I'm thinking about doing the same thing down in Mexico. That's like motorcycles, music, food, maybe surfing, maybe other stuff. We
Cool.
have like drag racing and all sorts of wacky stuff. So
there's got to be an airstrip that you can drag race on down there.
There is.
Yeah, I know a few. And I'm not going to twist your arm into involving Slow Baja into that yet. Maybe by the end of the show. I hear you have one of the Eakins brothers' bikes.
You know what? I don't.
Did you? Did I get that right, or did I get that wrong?
Well, long story. I interviewed Dave Eakins. I MC an event called the Quail Motorcycle Gathering every year in Carmel Valley. And one year I interviewed Dave Eakins, who was the first person to do a timed run down the length of Baja as a promotional gig for Honda in 1962.
Yep, so set the record before a record existed.
Exactly. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Set the first record, then it doesn't matter how fast you're going. But he basically went from Tijuana to La Paz in 40 hours before there was a paved highway. So kudos to him. He didn't stop. He crashed about 1 million times. And he rode a 62 Honda CL72 Scrambler. And I asked him if that bike still existed. He said he had no idea. He didn't think so. So I found another one just by happenstance. And when we bought our house, for that March of 2020, before we bought our house, I brought the Honda down there with the intention of making a film celebrating this bike and Baja and etc. So I didn't have his bike. I had the same bike that he rode and discussed it. I made a film called Baja Scrambler with David Martinez, and it premiered on Petrolicious the very day they exploded, actually.
Well, I'm sad. I'm sad for Petrolicious's self implosion there, but in my life, Petrolicious was must-see TV every Tuesday. My son and neither one of us could watch Petrolicious until he was home from school and home from sports, and then we would get the laptop out and watch it. And there's so many people that I knew from the car world who managed to get featured there. It was really an amazing thing in its day. Yeah. Really, I'm blanking on the photographer's name. The videographer's name who shot the first 100 films. I got to know him a little bit through the La Carrera Panamericana, but Valkyrie Pictures. Sorry, I'm blanking on your name, but really an amazing thing. Right. In it was a gift to the universe week after week after week. Yeah, exactly. That was my first collaboration with them and my last collaboration with them. I was good friends with Mark McInnes, who was their what we call not general manager, but basically like that production manager at the time, and he asked to do a collab, so they actually helped finance that first film, the Baja Scrambler film. And the very day it appeared, like 8 a.m, Mark called me up and says, "Paul, you're associated with Petrolicious?
Congratulations." And I'm pulling your film. I'm like, what? And he says, no, you're not following Twitter.
This is your own safety.
Exactly. I don't want your face to be the first thing people see when they come to Petrolicious this morning. Well, so I tried to get Mark to work for me at the Vintagent, and also Nadia, who was their film curator, editor, production person. And but yeah, anyway. Horses for courses, different animals. It didn't quite work out, which is too bad.
Well, you said you didn't start out as a dirt guy, but I do want to talk to you about film. And how did On Any Sunday land with you when you were a youngster? Did you see it in the theater? Did it have any effect on you at all?
You know what? No, it had a big impact on my brothers, who were older than me, like 4 and 6 years older. I mean, they were into motorcycles.
So there's a secondhand impact when you were holding on to them and they were launching off of stuff, scaring the bejesus out of you.
Exactly. Yeah. What is it about older brothers that need to torture, their siblings by scaring the crap out of them? But it's true. Yeah. It did not deter me from buying a motorcycle as soon as I could, 15. But you know what? On Any Sunday didn't really. I don't think I was that generation, or it was other things that really hooked me about motorcycles. Things like Danny Lyon's book, The Bike Riders.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, a friend found a copy for 50 cents at a bookstore in 1985 and gave it to me for my birthday and wrote, in purple crayon in the inside to Paul from Crazy Tits, because that was her nickname.
It was a first edition hardcover, actually.
It was worth thousands.
Now
we didn't know.
Now it is for sure.
We didn't know. Anyway,
Crazy Tits. I hope you still have it.
Of course, I have it, and many more copies. Believe me.
Yeah.
Danny
Lyons was a phenomenal documentary photographer who did some of the most amazing photographs. Riding in, was it St. Louis, Chicago,
yeah.
and that was sort of mid '60s, correct?
Yeah,
it was early before choppers. It was British bikes primarily.
Well, no, it was. We have to circle back a little bit, but Danny Lyons started out as a photographer for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which were the folks who were trying to get black folks to register to vote in the South and getting murdered and et cetera, et cetera. He was their staff photographer. And in, I guess, 1964, they were kind of winding up, and he went to the University of Chicago to get his degree in photography. And at the same time joined the Chicago Outlaws, which was a motorcycle club, but not like the Hells Angels, not like the Hells Angels. I mean, in 1964, the Hells Angels was a bohemian motorcycle club, not a organized crime syndicate. I mean, they were rough, but they were also just a bunch of weirdos who liked bikes.
Right.
So
guys back from the war looking for some thrills.
Exactly. And so he created, through the University of Chicago, assembled this book of, all it is interviews with these club members and his epic photographs, which are, have influenced filmmakers and photographers ever since.
Yeah, a beautiful documentary. And obviously he was living it on the inside. Yeah. And so that the intimacy is, he was a brilliant photographer. Yeah. So I was going to ask you earlier about Danny Lyons and do you have his book? Are you aware of his book, The Paper Negative?
Yeah, actually. Yeah.
Of course you are.
I have all his books. Yeah.
Of course you do.
He's an icon. I've been trying to get a hold of him for years. He's pretty reclusive.
Interesting.
Maybe especially now that they made a film out of his book.
Yeah. Again, just hearing about your wet plate work, the way that Mexican portrait street photographers used to photograph, have their fingers in the chemistry and photograph, basically they're doing wet plate photography.
Yeah.
They'd shoot a negative and then they'd shoot it on the paper, right? So you would get the print
immediately. Yeah.
Yeah, truly. That was still going on in Tijuana when I was a college kid. Yeah, yeah. In the middle 80s. That kind of there were still a handful of guys who were doing that.
Yeah.
Before they were pulling Polaroids apart and selling you the Polaroid, the old guys.
Yeah, and in Asia and in, let's say, Afghanistan. I actually have a friend in Spain who bought a photographer's kit and took it to Vietnam. He bought a photographer's kit in Afghanistan and took it to Vietnam and did a series of these. They were like montagnards. There were these Vietnamese who lived up in the mountains and were loggers, sometimes illegally, and they modified these motorcycles as trucks. Basically, they would have like special subframes with like 6 pairs of shocks to carry the load, and they would be carrying like trees, like 4 or 5 trees on a little Honda 110. And he wanted to take these instant photographs, and so I did a story about them. It's fantastic.
Well, let's take a minute and just talk about the breadth of stuff that you do. You're artist. You do faux finishing and decorative painting.
Used to.
But so you have an artist, legit artist chops.
Right.
You're a writer, I shouldn't be saying all this stuff, but writer, photographer, curator. Serious writer of old and interesting stuff, and you get around.
Yeah, well, it's a hell of a lifestyle.
Renaissance man.
Somebody's got to do it.
And you're not particularly dressed today, but you're a bit of a dandy, if I can say that in the kindest sense of the word.
Yeah, so my mother was a fashion designer, and my grandmother was an editor at Vogue and taught at Parsons, and like in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And so I come by it honestly, and like a appreciation of clothing. And so, yeah, I like clothes. I like showing up at a place dressed like nobody else.
Well, and that's also something that I noticed about you. In my background, not that you're going to see it here today, but as you're a fifth-generation San Franciscan, and I only know one other fifth-generation San Franciscan, maybe two, pretty rare thing.
Yeah.
Carl Nolte and Aaron Doyle Ebling, probably the Doyle Drive and Doyle's, she's Feelings and Doyle's and all those folks.
Yep.
Carl Nolte was longtime reporter for the
I know who Carl Nolte is,
Chronicle.
For sure.
But anyways, my grandfather had Grodin's men's clothing store and was one of the best dressed men in America in his day in 1959 and 60. He was a president of the Men's and Boys Retailers Association.
Amazing.
So he took dressing very, very seriously. So I appreciate it when I see photos of you at the Quail and you are dressed to the nines, let us say.
It's like you
make the effort.
You bring energy to the situation when you make an effort. You know, it's like you see people just wearing the same slouchy jeans and T-shirt, and that's fine. I don't judge anybody, but if you see somebody who's like made an effort to dress for an occasion, people appreciate it, whether they know what or why, and they may even make fun, but still they're like, it brings something to the table. Yeah,
well, you really do. The part of this, of all the things that we listed there, the thing that is super fascinating to me is curating. That's really, I'm assuming you don't do it completely solo, that you assemble teams, but like your ADV Overland show at the Peterson, which I had a chance to see, really an amazing collection. And you were right out front, like this stuff isn't out there. You're not saying, oh, we're just going to rip off this other show. This is like you're out there thinking of it, dreaming it up, finding those bikes, creating the getting the information, the dioramas, the whole thing, and finding, I'm sure, to some degree, selling it and finding the funding to get those artifacts shipped to the museum.
Yep. And
how did that come about?
Is expensive. I've curated a few shows before I developed a relationship with the Peterson Museum. I co-curated a couple of exhibits at Sturgis, actually, with Michael Lichter, the photographer who has his own gallery in Sturgis, and then I curated an exhibit at the National Motorcycle Museum, which is gone now, but in Anamosa, Iowa. And I was asked to help put together an exhibit for the Peterson Museum of contemporary Los Angeles-based custom motorcycles. And I kind of, grabbed the hand of the Peterson and yanked it and leveraged that into a 5-year contract as a guest curator there. So every year we had a new exhibit. That first one was Custom Revolution, and it was a worldwide exhibit of contemporary customs. And the next year was the first ever museum exhibit of electric motorcycles. It was called Electric Revolution. And that was in 2017. And 2018, we had something, we were obliged, or the Peterson felt obliged to Audi to do an exhibit about Ducati, which I transformed into something called Silver Shotgun, which was about sexy Italian design
with
in
a
the
quick
70s.
Flip of the hands. I transformed this corporate shindig,
exactly.
This corporate boondoggle
stuff down my throat. But hey, I was grateful for all of it. And then I did the Adventure Overland, which was by far my favorite.
2021, was that when that show was?
Yes, it was 2021,
yeah.
Right. How cool. I mean, I really had a lot of connections. I had been studying overland travel of all sorts. I mean, the first documented account of overland travel is AD 500 by a Chinese monk who walked from probably Beijing to Calcutta or to, Jodhpur or something to retrieve the Buddhist sutras. He wrote a book in 500. I read the 1500 version of it. So Still a 500-year-old book, 3 volumes, fantastic book called Journey to the West, the original adventure novel. And from this book, you understand what all Chinese like sword and sorcery movies are about, because it's all there. All the characters that you see, monkey and all these crazy magical turtles and gods and goddesses, it's fantastic. Anyway, so that was the starting point for the story. And at that point, the stars were the limit. So we contacted JPL and borrowed a couple of Mars rovers.
Yeah.
Of course, the models, because the originals are still there, and found the Lost in Space, both Lost in Space chariots, and like all sorts of. It was crazy.
And so this is what I'm getting to. I'm like, this was deep.
It was deep. It was so
deep.
fun.
You must be a little bit like a dog on a trail when you start, saying, can we get this thing?
Right.
Where is this thing? How do I get this thing? You must be relentless when this stuff, when you know, like you've got the show and you're trying to make it happen.
Actually, it's not that hard in the sense, like most people, when you say, hey, you want to show your vehicle at the Peterson Museum in this show, they say yes.
Yeah.
Almost everyone. So we had one no, which is too bad. It was a friend of mine who had loaned me Bruff Superiors twice to do the cross-country cannonball run. These were $500,000 motorcycles that he let me ride for 3,600 miles.
Right, but he's not going to let you put them in a museum?
No, but he had a 1912 Henderson 4-cylinder, which was the first motorcycle to go around the world in 1912 and 13. There's a fantastic book about it. Carl Stearns Clancy wrote it, and it's so fascinating to read a round-the-world account that's before the First World War.
Wow.
And how differently people thought and how differently Americans thought. He was still a bit of a dick, but so fascinating,
Tell me how you really feel. Don't hold back.
He was a privileged white dick from Harvard,
Well, that's who's traveling around the world in those days.
Hello.
And still today, right?
Exactly.
To some degree.
Well, although, a similar situation is Dana in his 2 years before the mast.
Yeah.
He wrote a book about
Richard.
sailing.
That's Richard Henry, Dana,
yeah,
folks.
Taking a year's break from Harvard, a gap year or whatever, and sailing to frickin' California, and it took him, 2 or 3 years of going up and down the coast, when it was under the most primitive conditions, trying to collect enough cow hides,
right,
to justify sailing back.
That's why all those missions were down there, to collect the cow hides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy to read.
It is crazy stuff.
I mean, talk about Baja. They went up Baja, and to read like when Los Angeles or San Diego was as primitive as the most primitive village in Baja is now, is mind-blowing and
truly
wonderful. Anyway, so these are the people who travel.
Yeah, and so I've always had a fascination with travel books, which is why I'm reading or read 2 years before the mast, before I got to sail to Normandy 30 years ago? Jesus. Something that really screwed me up a few years before that was being on a backpacking trip through Europe and finding an English copy in an Austrian bookstore of Jupiter's Travels. At what point did that come into your life, and did it have an effect on you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's Ted Simon, who actually lives in the wine country, went around the world on a Triumph 500 in the early 70s and wrote a beautiful account. He was by far from the first motorcyclist to travel around the world, but he wrote one of the best books. And
it really screwed me up.
Yeah. Yeah, if you didn't have the travel bug and were susceptible to it, he would definitely give it to you.
Yeah.
I did. So let's see. I probably read that in about 88. And by chance, the next year, I did a 5-month, 6,000-mile tour of Europe before the wall fell in Berlin. So I got visas and went through East Germany and Poland and Czechoslovakia. The day before we left, a friend was painting their house, and he was a Polish house painter. And he says, "You're going to Poland?" And he ran home and came back and handed me the keys to his apartment in Warsaw and gave me his mother's phone number. And so we had a home base in Warsaw and stayed in that country, I think for 6 weeks, and just
if you had toilet paper, it was a pretty good place to stay.
Oh my God, that toilet paper was awful. You could have definitely taken the rust off your motorcycle just using the dry toilet paper.
Exactly. Today on Toilet Paper Talk. Hey, so adventures, you had them before the internet. You write about them now on the internet. You're having amazing adventures in Baja, obviously, that we talked about with the mule trip and your dirt bikes, riding around these beautiful vintage bikes. What is adventure? Where does adventure live for you? And why do in an era where everything's in our pocket on our phone, why do we still have to have adventures?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of opinions on that, and I think there's different flavors of adventure. So, I mean, the adventures I've mostly had are based on intense curiosity. It's like, I've heard there's something really amazing here, and then I want to see it. Or I've heard that, people talk about how millennials just want experiences, and I'm not really talking about experiences that someone curates for you. It's like, I just want to go and check this thing out, that I've heard is cool or looks amazing, or maybe I want to go photograph there. Like, I was on my way to Idaho 2 weeks ago, and I'd heard of this place, seen a picture of this place called Leslie Gulch up in the far northeast corner of Oregon, just close to the Idaho and Washington borders. And it looks like it could be in Utah, and very little travel. It's not a national park. I should never have told you the name. I have to kill you now. And
I'll bleep that out. What were you riding? We'll distract them by motorcycle talk.
I was in my van because
Okay.
I was taking my bike up for a vintage motorcycle rally. But I pulled my Triumph out, and I rode up and down the canyon a little bit. And I also took some wet plate photos of these incredible rock formations. It's like, that was an adventure. I was all alone and out there, and for the first time, and in a very remote area. And there were a couple of other people there, which is interesting. The 4-wheel drive $200,000 Sprinter Clan was there. There were a couple of those.
They're everywhere.
They are everywhere.
They're
it was
everywhere.
good to see them being used as they should, instead of just in a national park campground.
Right. Well, Paul, you've been super generous with your time. We're going to wrap it up here, closing up my little pink book. At the end of the day, why the Vintagent? Why? Now I know the story behind the Vintagent, but you've devoted an awful lot of time to something that is a magnificent gift to the world. In my opinion, I'm guessing here, if I peeled behind the curtain, probably is not lucrative.
Yeah, so...
And I'm assuming you're obsessed about getting it right.
Yeah, I mean, it's my own publishing voice. So I've had my website for 18 years, and it's developed, and I've had many people help along the way, and like building me a new website in 2016, and and I have people that I pay to write stories, and a film curator who puts up a new different film every week, and writers that contribute, and a lot of people who contribute just because they want to get their stuff out there. And yeah, I think it's mostly because, every once in a while I find a story that I had not heard before, and I want to pursue that story. The latest one, let's say, I was looking at Instagram, which is not a total waste of time, and there was a picture of a black man with a twin Triumph engine drag bike, and from the 60s. And I was like, wow,
Who is that guy?
And there was no information, but I pinged the person who had posted it, and he says, oh, check this link. So I checked that link, and then I went farther down the rabbit hole, and I realized that this book had been documented this bike had been documented in a book that was sitting a foot away from me. So I opened the book up. I saw the information.
Library.
I have a huge library, thousands of books, and I called the author, who's a friend of mine, and says, "Hey, what do you know about this guy?" He says, "Oh my God, I've known that guy for years, and there's 2 people you should interview, and I'll introduce you." So I call and interview those guys, and then it's a story about that had never really been told. That to me is like super fascinating. It's
so you're still really driven by your own personal curiosities, and then finding that story and getting that story told beautifully.
For sure.
So where can folks find you?
thevintagent.com.
The Vintagent everywhere.
Or the Vintagent on Instagram. My Facebook account got hacked. I'll get it back some point, but it's the Vintagent too.
I was just wondering about the recent changes in that. I'm not a big Facebook guy, but I was just doing my research on you, and I said, well, there's some difference in stuff here.
Yeah. I got played very sophisticatedly because I'm on a lot of podcasts, and I got reached out on a podcast by a fairly well-known comedian, and all the bona fides were there, and they handed me over to their tech guy, who managed to snag my Facebook.
I'm sorry.
Meta is an evil corporation.
So we have the Vintagent.
Yes.
We have the Vintagent on Instagram.
Yes.
Which is cooler than the other half of that family. So don't go there. And then you have on Instagram, I took a deep dive on it, Moto
Tintype.
Moto Tintype. Can you just talk? Do you carry that gear on your bike?
On the bike? No.
Okay.
It's too much.
I was trying to picture it.
Yeah. No,
I didn't see how you could do it.
Who did try that?
We're talking about the wet plate gear that you have your van for, but I was just trying to figure out how do you do that?
In a dark box.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I followed one guy who had a dirt bike that had the wet plate gear on the back, and he went out into the mountains and stuff and took landscapes, which I thought was like, we are not
God
worthy.
Yeah,
but Moto Tintype is where our wet plate work lives.
All right. Well,
which is a website too. So
Moto Tintype.
Yeah.
The Vintage, and I feel like I'm all over the place right now trying to corral the last of places where people can see you and your stuff.
Yeah, just Google my name or Google the Vintagent, and you're fine. You'll
and there'll be links,
Amazon author page and all
links
that kind of
in the show notes, folks. There'll be links in the show notes. So good old fashioned, click the link, and you'll get to see more about this amazingly talented person who's sitting here with me, whose last name I'm going to butcher again.
So I'll say it for you, Paul Dorleon.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
We did it. Hey, well, I hope you liked that one. Paul is doing some amazing things and is always on the go. So I'm just delighted that we got a chance to have this conversation at his shop in San Francisco. And if you like what I'm doing, if you like that I'm meeting folks where they are, in their place, at their home, at their shop, in Baja, all over, I get around. And that takes time, takes a little dineros too. So, if you got some tacos bouncing around in your pocket, you want to drop one in the tank, I can still use them. That's right, slowbaja.com/donations to drop a taco in the tank. If you don't have any tacos to drop in the tank, I get it. You can drop a 5-star review. That's right, a 5-star review, and say something nice about me on Apple or Spotify. And if you do that, and now you got to listen up, folks, and drop a 5-star review when it posts. Take a screenshot of it, send it to me at slowbaja.com/contact, and I'm going to send you a pair of Slow Baja shot glasses to say thanks. Now, these things aren't available in stores. There's only one way to get them, other than dropping this review. There's one way to get them, and that's coming on a trip with me. You get them in your Slow Baja swag bags. But right now, while supplies lasts, objects in mirror may be closer than they appear. Ask your doctor if Baja's right for you. That's right. Drop a 5-star review. Say something nice about me. Send me a screenshot after it posts at slowbaja.com/contact. Make sure you send your address, and I will send you a pair of shot glasses so you and a friend can have a drink to me. All right. Now, if you're at slowbaja.com/contact, you might as well go over to the Slow Baja shop, because I've got hats, I've got tees, the deluxe canvas bag is back in stock. All the stickers are there, magnets, whatever you're looking for, I've got you covered. Check it out, slowbaja.com/shop. All right. It's that time of the show that I tell you about Slow Baja alum Motorcycle Mary. I do hope you've seen her film, Motorcycle Mary. You can see it screening now at YouTube, but she's an off-road motorsports Hall of Famer. She was just at the Peterson Museum, and she had a pal, Steve McQueen. You know, Steve loved Baja. Steve really did. And Steve said Baja is life. Whatever happens before or after is just waiting. You know, people always ask me, what's the best modification that I've ever made to Slow Baja? Without a doubt, it's my Shieldman seats. You know, Toby at Shieldman USA could not be easier to work with. He recommended a Vario F for me and a Vario F XXL for my navigator Ted, as Ted's kind of a big guy. And Toby was absolutely right. The seats are great and they fit both of us perfectly. And let me tell you, after driving around Baja for over a year on these seats, I could not be happier. Shieldman, Slow Baja approved. Learn more and get yours at shieldman.com. You know, I'm all about keeping things simple, traveling light, and finding the really good stuff. And that's why I've been wearing iron and resin for years. It's not just clothes. It's gear that holds up in the dust, the salt, the spilled tacos, and still looks good when you roll into town. Made in small batches by folks who care, no flash, no fast fashion, just the kind of stuff that gets better the more you wear it. Check them out at ironandresin.com and pick up something that'll last the next 1,000 miles.